हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम बैक टू माय चैनल। तो अब हम देखने वाले हैं एनसीईआरटी का पॉलिटी क्लास 6, जिसमें आज हम देखेंगे यूनिट 2 जो कि है गवर्नमेंट। तो इसमें है हमारा चैप्टर 3 व्हाट इज़ गवर्नमेंट। तो शुरू करते हैं हमारा आज का चैप्टर। यू मस्ट हैव हर्ड द वर्ड गवर्नमेंट mentioned several times. In this chapter, you will learn about what a government is and the important role it plays in our lives. What do governments do? How do they decide what to do? What is the difference between different types of governments, such as monarchies and democracies? Read more and find out. Every country needs a government to make decisions and get things done. These can be decisions about where to build roads and schools, or how to reduce the price of onions when they get too expensive, or ways to increase the supply of electricity. The government also takes action on many social issues. For example, it has several programs to help the poor. It does other important things such as running postal and railway services. The government also has the job of protecting the boundaries of the country and maintaining peaceful relations with other countries. It is responsible for ensuring that all its citizens have enough to eat and have good health facilities. When there are natural disasters like the tsunami or an earthquake, it is the government that mainly organizes aid and assistance for the affected people. If there is a dispute or if someone has committed a crime, you find people in a court. Courts are also part of the government. Perhaps you are wondering how governments manage to do all this and why it is necessary for them to do so. When human beings live and work together, there needs to be some amount of organization so that decisions can be made. Some rules have to be made that apply to everyone. For example, there is a need to control resources and protect the territory of a country so people can feel secure. Governments do this on behalf of their people by exercising leadership, taking decisions, and implementing this among all the people living in their territory. Levels of government. Now that you know that the government is responsible for many different things, can you think of how it manages to do all this? The government works at different levels, at the local level, at the level of the state, and at the national level. The local level means in your village, town, or locality. The state level would mean that which covers an entire state like Haryana or Assam, and the national level relates to the entire country. Later in this book, you will read about how local level government functions, and when you go into the next few classes, you will learn about how governments function at the state and central levels. Laws and the government. The government makes laws, and everyone who lives in the country has to follow this. This is the only way governments can function. Just like the government has the power to make decisions, similarly, it has the power to enforce its decisions. For example, there is a law that says that all persons driving a motor vehicle must have a license. Any person caught driving a vehicle without a license can either be jailed or fined a large sum of money. Without these laws, the government's power to make decisions is not of much use. In addition to any actions that governments can take, there are also steps that people can take if they feel that a particular law is not being followed. If a person feels, for example, that they were not hired for a job because of their religion or caste, he or she may approach the court and claim that the law is not being followed. The court can then give orders about what should be done. Types of government. Who gives the government this power to make decisions and enforce laws? The answer to this question depends on the type of government there is in a country. In a democracy, it is the people who give the government this power. They do this through elections in which they vote for particular persons and elect them. Once elected, these persons form the government. In a democracy, the government has to explain its actions and defend its decisions to the people. Another form of government is monarchy. The monarch or king or queen has the power to make decisions and run the government. The monarch may have a small group of people to discuss matters with, but the final decision making power remains with the monarch. Unlike in a democracy, kings and queens do not have to explain their actions or defend the decisions they take. Democratic governments. India is a democracy. This achievement is the result of a long and eventful struggle of the Indian people. There are other places in the world where people have also struggled to have democracies. You now know that the main feature of a democracy is that the people have the power to elect their leaders. So, in a sense of democracy is ruled by the people. The basic idea is that people rule themselves by participating in the making of these rules. Democratic governments in our times are usually referred to as representative democracies. In representative democracies, people do not participate directly but instead choose their representatives through an election process. These representatives meet and make decisions for the entire population. These days, a government cannot call itself democratic unless it allows what is known as universal adult franchise. This means that all adults in the country are allowed to vote. Nowhere in the world have governments willingly shared power. All over Europe and the USA, women and the poor have had to fight for participation in government. Women's struggle to vote got strengthened during the First World War. This movement is called the women's suffrage movement, as the term suffrage usually means right to vote. During the war, many men were away fighting, and because of this, women were called upon to do work that was earlier considered men's work. Many women began organizing and managing different kinds of works. When people saw this, they began to wonder why they had created so many unfair stereotypes about women and what they were capable of doing. So, women began to be seen as being equally capable of making decisions. The suffragettes demanded the right to vote for all women, and to get their demands heard, they chained themselves to railings in public places. Many suffragettes were imprisoned and went on hunger strikes, and they had to be fed by force. American women got the right to vote in 1920, while women in the UK got to vote on the same terms as men some years later in 1928. But it was not always like this. Can you believe that there was a time when governments did not allow women and the poor to participate in elections? In their earliest forms, governments allowed only men who owned property and were educated to vote. This meant that women, the poor, the propertyless, and the uneducated were not allowed to vote. The country was governed by the rules and regulations that these few men made. In India, before independence, only a small minority was allowed to vote, and they therefore came together to determine the fate of the majority. Several people, including Gandhiji, were shocked at the unfairness of this practice and demanded that all adults have the right to vote. This is known as universal adult franchise. Writing in the journal Young India in 1931, Gandhiji said, "I cannot possibly bear the idea that a man who has got wealth should have the vote. but that a man who has got character but no wealth or literacy should have no vote, or that a man who works honestly by the sweat of his brow day in and day out should not have the vote for the crime of being a poor man. तो ये है इस चैप्टर का एक्सरसाइज, और ये बहुत छोटा सा चैप्टर था। तो अभी हम चैप्टर 4 शुरू करेंगे, जो कि है की एलिमेंट्स ऑफ डेमोक्रेटिक गवर्नमेंट। तो शुरू करते हैं। In this chapter, you will read about some of the key elements that influences the working of a democratic government. This includes people's participation, the resolution of conflict, and equality and justice. South Africa is a country that has people of several races. There are black people who belong to South Africa, whites who came there to settle, and Indians who came as laborers and traders. Maya Naidu, an 11-year-old South African girl living in the town of Johannesburg, was helping her mother clear off her old boxes. She found a scrapbook full of pictures and newspaper articles. There were many pictures of a young schoolboy of around 15 years of age. When she asked her mother who the boy was, she was told that he was called Hector Peterson. He had been shot by the police. Maya was shocked. Why? She asked. Her mother explained that South Africa was earlier governed by apartheid laws. Apartheid means separation on the basis of race. South African people were divided into white, black, Indian, and colored races. According to the law, these races were not allowed to mingle with each other, to live near each other, or even to use common facilities. Maya could not believe her ears. Maya's mother sounded angry when she spoke about life under apartheid. She told Maya that in those days, hospitals were separate and so were ambulances. An ambulance meant for white people would always be well equipped, while one meant for black people was not. There were separate trains and buses. Even the bus stops were different for black and white people. Non-whites were not allowed to vote. The best land in the country was reserved for the white people, and non-whites had to live on the worst available land. Thus, blacks and colored people were not considered to be equal to whites. One black township was the southwestern township, Soweto. Hector Peterson lived here, and he and his classmates joined the protest against learning the Afrikaans language in school. This was the language that the whites spoke. Hector and other school students were being forced to learn this language, but they wanted to learn their own language, Zulu. The South African police beat up the protesters mercilessly and shot at the crowd. One of their bullets killed Hector. This was on 16 June 1976. The African National Congress, a group of people who led the struggle against apartheid, and their most well-known leader, Nelson Mandela, fought the apartheid system for several years. Finally, they succeeded, and in 1994, South Africa became a democratic country in which people of all races were considered equal. Let us now try to understand what a democratic government means to all of us. Participation. Why do we have regular elections? You have already read in previous chapter that people make the decisions in a democracy. Through voting in elections, people elect leaders to represent them. These representatives take decision on behalf of the people. In doing so, it is assumed that they will keep in mind the voices and interests of the people. All governments are elected for fixed periods. In India, this period is 5 years. Once elected, governments can stay in power only for that period. If they want to continue to be in power, then they have to be re-elected by the people. This is a moment when people can sense their power in a democracy. In this way, the power of the government gets limited by regular elections. Other ways of participating. Elections are usually held once in 5 years. Besides voting, there are other ways of participating in the process of government. People participate by taking an interest in the working of the government and by criticizing it when required. In August 2005, when a particular government increased the money people had to pay for electricity, people expressed their disapproval very sharply. They took out rallies and also organized a signature campaign. The government tried to explain and defend its decision, but finally listened to the people's opinion and withdrew the increase. The government had to change its decision because it is responsible to the people. There are many ways in which people express their views and make comments, understand what actions they should take. These include dharnas, rallies, strikes, signature campaigns, etc. Things that are unfair and unjust are also brought forward. Newspapers, magazines, and TV also play a role in discussing government issues and responsibilities. While it is true that a democracy allows people to participate, it is also true that not all sections of people are actually able to do so. Another way for people to participate is by organizing themselves into social movements that seek to challenge the government and its functioning. Members of the minority community, Dalits, Adivasis, women, and others are often able to participate in this manner. If a country's people are alert and interested in how the country is run, the democratic character of the government of that country will be stronger. So, the next time we see a rally winding through the streets of our cities and towns or villages, we should pause to find out what the rally is about, who is participating in it, and what they are protesting about. This will help to give us a sense of how our government works. Need to resolve conflict. In Maya's story, you read about how conflicts can often lead to violence and death because one group decides that it is alright to use force to prevent the other group from protesting. Conflicts occur when people of different cultures, religions, regions, or economic backgrounds do not get along with each other, or when some among them feel they are being discriminated against. People may use violent means to settle their differences. This leads to fear and tension among others living in an area. The government is responsible for helping to resolve conflicts. Let's read about some of the conflicts in our society and the role of the government in resolving them. The Indian Constitution lays down the basic rules or laws that have to be followed by everyone. These laws are for both the government and the people. Conflicts and differences have to be resolved according to these laws. We'll read more about this in later classes. Religious processions and celebrations can sometimes lead to conflicts. For example, the route of a procession takes may lead to a conflict. The government, particularly the police, play an important role in getting representatives of concerned communities to meet and try and arrive at a solution. At times, there is fear that violence may erupt, with people throwing stones or trying to disrupt the procession. The police is responsible for ensuring that violence does not take place. Rivers too can become a source of conflict between states. A river may begin in one state, flow through another, and in a third. The sharing of a river water between different states that the river goes through is becoming an issue of conflict. For example, you may have heard about the Kaveri water dispute between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. The water stored in Krishnarajasagara Dam in Karnataka is used for irrigating a number of districts and for meeting the needs of the city of Bengaluru. The water stored in Mettur Dam in Tamil Nadu is used for crops grown in the delta region of the state. A conflict arises because both dams are on the same river. The downstream dam in Tamil Nadu can only be filled up if water is released from the upstream one located in Karnataka. Therefore, both states can't get as much water as they need for people in their states. This leads to conflict. The central government has to step in and see that a fair distribution is worked out for both states. Equality and justice. One of the key ideas of a democratic government is its commitment to equality and justice. Equality and justice are inseparable. The earlier practice of untouchability is now banned by law. This group of people were denied education, transport, or medical facilities, and even the chance to offer prayers. Dr. Ambedkar, whom you have read about earlier in this book, and many others like him, realized that such practices must not continue and that justice can only be achieved when people are treated equally. The government also recognizes this and makes special provisions for groups within society that are unequal. For instance, in our society there is a general tendency to value and care for the boy child more than the girl child. This means that society does not value the girl and boy child equally, and this is unjust. In this context, the government steps in to promote justice by providing special provisions that can enable girls to overcome the injustice that they are subjected to. Thus, it is possible that fees for girls might be waived or lowered in government schools or colleges. How do you think lowering the school fees would help girls attend school? Can you think of any experience from your life in which you have helped someone out of a situation which you thought was unfair? Did everyone else see it the same way? What did you have to say to convince others that what you did was fair? सो ये है इस चैप्टर का क्वेश्चंस. तो इसी के साथ हमारा चैप्टर नंबर 4 भी कंप्लीट होता है. तो आज के वीडियो में हमने चैप्टर 3 और 4 कंप्लीट कर लिया है. तो आप अगर चैनल पर नए हैं तो चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर दीजिए और नोटिफिकेशन आइकन पर क्लिक कर दीजिए. और अगर आपको वीडियो अच्छा लगे तो लाइक कर दीजिए और अपने दोस्तों के साथ शेयर कीजिए ताकि उन्हें भी हेल्प हो सके. तो हमारा ये वीडियो यहीं तक था. थैंक यू. थैंक्स फॉर वॉचिंग.